Welcome to the Zachrilege cast. And we'll wait a second. Oh, play it again. There we go. I want to get the whole gong sound because I never do this right because the old sound disappeared from YouTube, and I always play it twice. Nathan, Dickey, welcome back to the show. So we're recording at 10 o'clock your time, and you have a beverage. What do you got?
I got a winter ale called Slayer from Ninkasi Brewing Company, and this is a special occasion. I actually don't usually drink before noon.
Usually. I like that. No, when I was on Atheist Talk, which is there, it's like 9 or 10, and I was like downstairs in my downstairs area. It wasn't even my normal studio, and I was like, well, I have to, right? And yeah, so I have a Creature Comforts Cocoa Bunny. This is a milk porter, so it's ale brewed with coconut, cocoa nibs, and coffee. So it's like most of my beers. It doesn't taste like beer. I don't even know what beer, it's whatever you call it. Now I used to do out of context quotes. This is kind of in context, but let me go ahead. This is from one of the episodes of your show I was listening to this morning. As critical thinkers and atheists, we should be interested and invested in claims and, oh crap. All right, my notes. We'll start over. This will be fixed. Wait a second. As critical thinkers and atheists, we should be interested and invested in claims, and that includes historical claims. Hope I got you right on that one.
Close enough.
Because this is about the last episode of A Leap of Doubt about Jesus' historicity. So you had, was it one of your former Trolling with Logic co-hosts on that one as kind of your co-host?
Yeah, my guest co-host, Wolf McNamara, and because he was really interested in the historical Jesus debate, that was kind of his jam, and he was really excited to get to talk to David Fitzgerald. So I like to invite friends on who have an interest in what I'm talking about and who I think would be really interested in also talking to the guest I have on for the topics they really like. I like to include like my everyday friends.
Well, you want like a perfect package in a way. Like you want someone who will be on your show first of all, and then you want someone who's really knowledgeable about the subject, and then if you can get some enthusiasm and someone who's really, really good on their feet, and then with Dave Fitzgerald, you pretty much get all that and more, and you go. Because that was, I think, when I was doing like, an hour show, and then when I had him on, it was almost an hour and a half because I'm like, it just got to keep going. There's too much goodness with him.
Oh,
and
yeah.
The topic is tough. I mean, I don't know. Did you finish his trilogy, the 900-page Jesus Living in Action?
It's on my reading list. I read his first kind of intro book, Nailed, which is like the short version. His 900-page trilogy is like where he really gets deep into the subject. The first book he wrote, Nailed, is kind of the primer, kind of get you in the mood, kind of intro work.
Yeah, it was a good, because that was like a normal size book, like 200, 300 pages. And then it's funny that he did the book about, and David makes it clear that he's not the official PhD historian. He's just kind of reporting on it. But boy, does he get a lot of sources. He's like, people still don't believe me after what I wrote in the first book. Okay, I'm going to go for 900 pages. And tons of footnotes. Mm-hmm. If you really want to challenge, you can try Richard Carrier's one too. Whatever you want to say about him as a person, the book seems pretty well sourced.
Mm-hmm.
So I invited you on the show right now, but your amazing show, Leap of Doubt, is currently on break. Can you talk about, I suppose for the people who don't know, maybe your elevator pitch, and I'll dare you to do a shorter elevator pitch than last time. And then, why did you say to yourself, you do a podcast with a lot of research, a lot of work. So what made you think, okay, I need to take a little time off?
Well, for the elevator pitch, my show is A Leap of Doubt, and it's a podcast about a wide range of issues, all kind of under the umbrella aegis of critical thinking, skepticism, humanism, and that covers a broad range of topics, not just atheism and whether Bigfoot and Loch Ness are real. It also includes social issues as well. As for the break I took, I'm finding that podcasting is a lot of work for me personally. I'm sure it's a lot of work for everybody else who podcasts, but it takes a toll. And I think everybody, regardless of their situation in life, can benefit from a mental health break or any other kind of break. It's just really good to recharge the batteries. It makes for a better podcast in the long run.
Well, I haven't really taken a hiatus like you because, like most good Americans, I ignore my mental health. So how do you take care of yours in addition to, saying, okay, this thing's really important to me and I enjoy it, but you got to think about yourself first.
Self-care takes a lot of forms. And I don't know. I think that any kind of work you do that involves a heavy amount of research, something you care about enough to invest a lot of preparation time into it, can burn you out, and your show can suffer as a result if you put in the amount of work that I think something that you really love will inevitably take.
True, yeah. Well, I wanted to ask, you said you had a journalism background, so did you was that what you went to school for, and what was kind of your focus?
I did go to school, college, and majored in journalism, and my focus was on writing at the time. And I was really interested in eventually going on to graduate school, although I haven't done that, and kind of focusing on investigative reporting, exposés, and that kind of thing. I'm really interested and fascinated by the industry of finding news, uncovering news that nobody knows about, instead of just merely reporting on events taking place. So I have a really strong interest in digging up and uncovering secrets.
Okay, well, I was wondering because I was a print journalist too. So this whole like interviewing people thing really wasn't something that came naturally to me. Because of course, when I first started doing interviews, it was sending people questions and they'd respond via email. And now I do it live. So for you, what was it like interviewing people when you first started the podcast? And do you feel like now you're more comfortable and confident when dealing with people? And what does it take to get you to that level where you're like, okay, I can do this?
Well, yeah, I am far more comfortable than when I first started. Starting out as just a panelist on the old Trolling with Logic podcast helped me kind of break me into it. But it has been a process of getting better and better and practice. And now I'm a lot more comfortable actually talking to people in live interview than I was when I first started. It's just something that takes time. It's something that I'm still not perfect at or 100% smooth and efficient at. It's always a work in progress, and I think that's true of even the most veteran interviewers, because no matter how long you've been doing this, every person you talk to has something new to throw at you. Nobody's you can't work off a script when you're talking to a person. You can work off a basic outline, have a set of questions prepared beforehand, but the conversation will always take different turns, and you always have to adjust for that and keep that in mind. And just always stay on your toes, and don't get nervous and freak out when the conversation goes off in a different direction than you had planned. Roll with it and embrace the
journey or the occasional tangent, I suppose.
Yeah, the tangent. There's another word that's on the edge of my brain that's
That'll come to you in like 15 minutes, or another sip of beer would help. So was there a topic that you did or an episode you did that really challenged maybe an existing belief you had on a subject?
That's a really good question. That's the kind of experience that I'm actually really open to and always wanting to have. I do know that I've learned something new from every guest I've had. I might have to think about if I've ever had somebody who's really challenged a pre-existing belief.
Yeah, I think I was asked that question on a show and I couldn't think of anything. And I don't know if I've had like eureka, like, oh, I flipped my decision. It usually is a takes time thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you believe something and then you hear evidence to the contrary, you kind of go, well, okay, maybe I'm on the fence now, and to get on the other side is going to take some time.
For any serious issue, you're not going to change your mind in the course of an hour. If there's something thrown at you that you're not sure about, you might say, I need to think about that some more, and I haven't considered that. Which, by the way, is perfectly legitimate to say. I don't think. I think for whatever reason, people are embarrassed to say that kind of thing too often.
Yeah, I would hope. I mean, when you call yourself a skeptic, that doesn't mean anything. It's meant less the longer I've seen people use that term, but it is really hard. I don't know if it's a human thing to just be approached or something and go, I don't really know, because you want, especially when you do podcasting, you're supposed to be the person who is confident about everything you say, no matter whether you are or not. And it's okay to kind of have those moments and go, all right, let me get back to you on that, and actually try to do it. Maybe that's the thing that doesn't happen.
One challenging show I did was when I was talking about, I did an episode about the HBO show Westworld and kind of talking about the philosophical issues that come up in that show. It's one of a series, kind of an informal series of episodes I do where I talk about the philosophical underpinnings of various pieces of popular culture. I've done an episode about The Good Place. I've done an episode about Black Mirror, and this latest one about Westworld. And I had two philosophy professors on my show for that one, and the two of them started arguing between each other about an issue of AI and free will. And for that particular argument, I was kind of on the sidelines and kind of thinking, yeah, I definitely have to think about this and read a lot more to even be able to weigh in on what these two philosophy professors are talking about.
Yeah, I got to episode 1 of season 2 of Westworld, and I just said, this is one of those shows that's that's just messing with your head. Sometimes you want them to do that, and then you go, all right, they're just gonna 5 episodes later just 180 on something that you thought was something, and I don't know. Just some shows can be a slog, and some are fun to look in. Like when you had Chris Watson on to talk about Wild Wild Country, that was a show that I think got a lot of play because Netflix just throws out tons of stuff, and some of it doesn't stick. And that one got a lot of it. And it was on, I think, some like atheist shows doing, or free thinker type shows. So was it? Did you have to like kind of watch it multiple times to before you did the show? Because that's a long one. I feel like it's like 9-10 hours total.
Yeah, I think it's like 7.5 hours total. I watched the series twice. The first time I just watched it straight through. The second time I took a lot of notes.
And
I still felt like I barely scratched the surface of everything that was going on with that story.
It's hard to do. Like there were so many layers. Like they could have just attacked one part of it, like a cult in America, and then the way the town reacted, and how they got really super violent. And you should just listen to the show. Well, maybe watch the show, then listen to Nathan's show. But what made you decide? Like we talked about this a little bit last time. We talked about the movie Network. The only time it's been discussed on this show. But a lot of people like to do shows about Christian movies and stuff that they're kind of making fun of. And then, what else? Maybe are there other movies or TV shows that you really want to be like future episodes of your show, or just things you've enjoyed?
I've got a few in mind. I'd like to do a Rick and Morty episode talking about the philosophy about Rick and Morty. And kind of when I say that, I really want to kind of stick it to the people who are really elitist about Rick and Morty. There are a lot of people who think that because they've watched Rick and Morty, they're all of a sudden experts in philosophy. I kind of want to point out that people who think that way have completely missed the point of the show. I do have an episode in the works that I've already started preparing for about The Handmaid's Tale, and how that frighteningly ties into very plausible real-world events and trends.
Yeah, that was a show I watched, I think 2 episodes of, and I was just like, this is too dark.
That's what I hear from a lot of people, that they really couldn't handle it. Like it was too real.
I mean, even the show itself, and then how it ties into what's happening currently. So you don't have to give everything away. Of course, this is a little bit of a tease. What are some of the topics that you are working for the reboot? What are some of the people you're going to have on talk about it?
I can't really speak to the people I'll have on because I haven't reached out to anybody yet. But I do have a whole list of topics that I'm definitely going to cover, guest or no guest. And one topic I'm really interested in covering, and which I think is really relevant and important, is immigration issues and the history of immigration in America, and the way in which moral panics among Americans have contributed to demonization of outsiders, and the way in which people in America have really belied the whole myth of America being welcoming and kind and loving to all comers. That's a beloved and old story about America that's actually not true. And I think looking at our history is really important, even though it might be really hard. And not very flattering to us. So looking at immigration and racism and the whole history behind that, and how we can learn from that and do better. I'm really interested in doing an episode about the purity culture industry of the 90s among evangelical Christians and churches. This is kind of inspired by an episode I did, one of my later ones, with Carly Gelsinger, talking about sexual abuse scandals in evangelical churches. And a lot of times when I'll do episodes, it'll inspire me to go deeper on something we touch on only a little bit. So we touched a little bit on the purity movement in evangelicalism, and I'm really interested in digging deeper into that. Another episode I have planned is I'd like to do a multiple interviewee episode looking at the stories of domestic abuse survivors and how they escaped from it, how they overcame it, what they can teach to, what they can say about their own experience that might help anybody who's currently dealing with domestic abuse. So those are some.
Got some real feel-good episodes coming up. That's nice. But there's subjects that need to be talked about. Like I don't know if high school or college, it was like a people's history of the United States of America, Howard Zinn, and it kind of told a lot of the stuff that didn't get in the history books because it is negative. I think people should know about that. And you mentioned like purity culture in the 90s. I'm like, well, you mean it ended? But that was like the heyday, like kind of how the satanic panic is attached to the 80s.
It was the heyday, and it's still going on. I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull this off, but I would love to get Joshua Harris on my show. He wrote the book that basically it didn't kickstart the purity culture movement, but it was kind of the Bible of the purity culture movement, called I Kissed Dating Goodbye. And that book was a huge bestseller in Christian churches, among the Christian community in general. Joshua Harris recently renounced his views and asked the publisher to stop publishing the book, which they've agreed to do because his views have changed. And he's recognized that the ideas he put forth in that book are actually harmful, and it's giving men and women both a harmful view of themselves.
I don't get how it could possibly be better to say, I'm not even going to date. So you're just going to like get, what is it, like getting set up with someone and you get married to them and you're stuck with them the rest of your life, whether it works or not.
Yeah. Have you seen those memes
to work on it?
Have you seen those memes that are just infuriating that conservative pundits and right-wing Fox News viewers share all the time? It's an old one. It's the old father giving rules for dating his daughter meme. And it's creepy and disturbing and just infuriating to me. Because purity culture is all about the men in the women's lives controlling them.
Well, those have like, what is it, the daddy-daughter dance? Which is
exactly.
Theory is you're dating your dad kind of, and then you get married and your dad kind of hands you off.
It still happens in traditional marriages. The father walking the bride down the aisle. That's a holdover from very, 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 very old tradition going back a long time of the father giving the groom permission to take his daughter. So that's a holdover from a very old way of thinking that we've progressed beyond today. And it's kind of taken for granted that this is kind of a ritual thing that everybody does. But underneath all that, there's a layer and there's a community and there's a subculture of people who really embrace really creepy stuff about women's roles and the nature of their relationship with men, which I think should be exposed and shown that in the 21st century, we don't have to live this way or embrace those traditions or philosophies.
Well, there's a bit of a like status, we'd call it status quo warrior, where people are trying to fight for the way things are now, but then there's not really a bit of any like introspection about, isn't it good to like look at the way things are now, the way people think things are, and actually see maybe we could improve. It's possible.
Well, yeah, look at the Gillette commercial. Before I watched that commercial, I thought, based on the reaction from a lot of men, I was like, this commercial must be really bad. Like, they must be saying some really anti-man things for them to have this reaction. I watched the commercial, and it's literally just saying, as men, we can do better. We can be a role model for younger men. We can hold each other up. We can not engage in sexual harassment. The tide is changing. There's a growing awareness that behaviors we took for granted are not acceptable in today's society. And we can stand up and be better. That's literally all it's saying. And
that's the hashtag for the First Lady, be better, right? Or is it be best? I can't remember.
I'm not sure.
It's kind of disappeared over time. But yeah, all I've seen is like the reaction, and it does seem like 75% of what the news is now is just like culture war stuff, or nothing really. It's like you're trying to win and own someone.
I'm just constantly fascinated and amazed and dismayed at the fact that people react so violently against the simple prospect that we can do things better than we have been doing them. And we can be decent people.
Because I saw a skeptic retweet like this satire, which was showing like women being crappy to women and going, women should be better too. And I'm like, I don't think you got the point of this. You're like,
oh yeah, the point is,
it's like women are bad too. It's like, wait a second, can't we all be better?
Yeah.
And I mean, it does. I mean, obviously, when you're talking about a giant corporation, they have tons of people make tons of money making these decisions. Obviously, they think that it's going to, first of all, well, I don't even know if they think it's going to get a good reaction. It's just going to get a reaction. Like, they clearly think like a boycott's not, like a potential boycott that's going to happen is not going to hurt them as much as the positive message helps them.
The people who write ads for Gillette, they're not stupid. They knew that there was going to be this kind of reaction from the internet culture, from this kind of machismo culture of, we're men, we're aggressive, we're tough, or we man up and we don't talk about our feelings, and we're hypersexual. And they knew there was going to be this reaction. They were fully aware of the culture wars, but they are also fully aware that the culture is changing, and people are interested in, I don't know, just being better people.
But this is something we kind of discussed before the show. The like two stories that came out. I mean, I guess a Gillette would be not a bad example too. But BuzzFeed did an article that was about the Russian investigation on Trump, and the claim was that Trump told Cohen why. And then, like a day later, I think it was Mueller, his team was like, "Yeah, that's not totally accurate." And so there have been a lot of people like Glenn Greenwald out there who just constantly have this thing like the Russian investigation's bad, the Russian investigation's bad, as opposed to, okay, that story was wrong, but we sure seem to have a lot of evidence that things happened. But where does truth kind of exist anymore? Do you, like, now that you kind of do your show, do you automatically, when you read or see media, just not put it into a category, okay, this is true, this is false? And how do you get to truth now?
Well, that's the $1 million question, and we could spend.
If you can answer that in like 5 minutes, that'd be great.
Yeah,
your point of view is fine.
Obviously, when you're looking at any news story online, there are certain indications. There are red flags right at the outset. There are positive vibes you get from certain stories. There are gut feelings you get that a story is completely wrong or that a story is pretty credible. Never trust your gut feeling. Always look for the most credible source. Always question your own biases to the best of your ability. Make sure that if you're reading something that you agree with, that you're aware of those biases, because you do get a rush from reading things you agree with. There's some neurophysiological evidence that shows that's the case. There's also some neurophysiological evidence that shows that, for example, the same region of the brain that processes belief is also the same region that processes factual information, meaning that people, everybody, all of us, we do not automatically distinguish between facts and belief. We view our beliefs as facts, and that's true of all of us. That makes getting to the truth difficult, and it's hard, and it's uncomfortable, but it's worth it. And there are a lot of things we can do to minimize bias. We're never going to get rid of it completely, but exposing yourself to information you find uncomfortable, even repugnant, is important, I think. And just comparing and contrasting different points of view. Always being humble. Always being willing to learn from others. Always being willing to revise your beliefs and update your beliefs as necessary. It's not shameful or wrong to say, I was wrong, and my beliefs have changed. People have a really hard time acknowledging that. And on some level, it's understandable because we're all humans. We don't like being wrong. But it's worth it. You can't live a good life if you're mired in falsehood, even if that falsehood is comforting and makes you feel really good.
Well, we do see, I mean, maybe the attack on the Gillette ad is similar to when you say anything negative about Christianity and someone who's a Christian, it's such a part of their identity that when you attack Christianity, like, you know, when the Catholics are hiding the priests that are molesting kids, you just point that out and that's like a personal attack. So in kind of tying this to kind of atheism, secularism, like, you know, first getting involved in it, you're like, this is great. I found all these like-minded people. And then you find out, oh no, there's some problematic people in the community or there's some problematic issues. How can you like kind of detach yourself to the point where you're not like minimizing yourself, your identity, but you're not taking all this stuff so personally that you can't take any criticism or negativity at all about what you believe?
Well, first of all, you're completely right. We've got to be able to.
I'm right, man. Episodes and I'm right. Show's over, everybody.
Yeah, it's what you pointed out is really important, that we need to be able to separate identity from belief. A person is not their beliefs. Beliefs don't have rights. People do. And I think that's really important to keep in mind.
I don't know, if belief is a company now. It seems like it is.
Well, yeah, corporations are people too. And so if corporations can be people, then beliefs can be people. Yeah. Because of what I've talked about earlier about the way facts and beliefs are kind of intertwined, it's hard for people to separate their beliefs from their identity and personality. But I think everybody is capable of doing that. I think people are smart, most people, and I think they have it within themselves to be able to do that, given humility and willingness to change their mind and recognize their beliefs as such, as beliefs. That's not, and just constantly keep in mind that nobody has the full picture, and we can always learn from everybody, and learning is a lifelong process, et cetera, et cetera. As far as what was the rest of your question about the? I think you mentioned something about extricating yourself from kind of groupthink when it comes to secularism and atheism, and not just expecting that Christians should do that, right?
I mean, it's like about finding a balance. Like you're clearly not going to say anybody who has this label that I have, I agree with automatically, but not to the point where you're just totally minimizing anything that's attached to you. Like, well, I might say somebody's like wrong in this particular instance, but I might defend them otherwise.
Right. It shouldn't be a zero-sum game of this person was wrong about this thing however long ago or recently, therefore everything they say is suspect. I think we should take every belief and every claim on its own merits and evaluate them independently, even independently of the person. Like you mentioned in passing earlier, whatever we may think of Richard Carrier as a person, his research is pretty good. That would be an example. Like we can learn from people we despise. We can learn from people whose lifestyle we don't want to emulate. And that's the same with beliefs and claims themselves. We can accept that what somebody is saying is true, but what they're saying elsewhere needs some work or needs a lot of work. I grew up in a Christian church, and that experience of growing up in not just a Christian church, but a fundamentalist Christian church that had a specific, explicit emphasis on anti-science, e.g. creationism. It ended up being valuable to me in the long run because it showed to me what groupthink looks like, and it showed me that the same thing can happen outside religious circles. Anybody, religious or not, can get to a point in their thinking where they're just conforming to what their in-group thinks, what their community thinks, and pushing out all outside opinion. And that can happen in every community. And as secularists, I think we should take on the responsibility of showing the world, showing the people outside of our circles who may be religious, who may be deeply conservative and very antagonistic to humanistic values, showing them by example that we're capable of thinking for ourselves and still getting along regardless. I think that's a really important example to set to people.
Well, do you think you have an advantage? Like I said, you mentioned earlier that, when you did your show, that maybe you didn't change your mind about a topic, but you've changed your mind about maybe not the most important topic, but about religion. So do you think that gives you an advantage because you had this thing that was like the cornerstone of your life, most important thing, and then you said, oh, no.
Mm-hmm.
Can you maybe help those of us who didn't have that background and kind of never really believed?
It can be really difficult to talk about briefly and encapsulate in a brief amount of time what it's like to believe, even for myself now, because I've noticed, not necessarily to my own comfort or satisfaction, that as time goes on, it's harder and harder for me to kind of recall or recapitulate in my mind what it was like to be a believer. Like, I do know what it felt like to believe, sort of, but as more time goes on, it's harder to recapture that feeling of, and the more I think about it, sometimes if I get to thinking about it too much or too deeply, it's like, wow, I really believed in God. I really believed that Christ died for my sins. What was that like? Like, I'm kind of losing that feeling of true belief in what that was like the more time goes on. And I think that's just a consequence of acclimatization to my new way of thinking, and the fact that I kind of got out earlier than a lot of people did. You hear a lot of stories about ex-pastors who became open atheists after a lifetime of preaching the word, and not just preaching it, but actually believing it while doing so. We can learn a lot from those people. People like Jerry DeWitt, people like David Madison, who I had on my show, who was a Lutheran pastor for most of his life. We can learn a lot from those people who spent their entire lives in the church and not being passive congregants, but actually actively living the Christian life of ministry. So I'm really interested in studying and reading the stories of ex-ministers and ex-pastors for that reason. I don't know if I kind of went off on a tangent there.
It's a good tangent. I mean, it made me think, like, I mean, I haven't had people die in my life that I've been like best friends with, but I have a feeling it's kind of like that, like someone in your life who you're really close with dies, and then over time your memories just kind of fade in a way. I mean, I have a bad example of mine is like all of the cats we've had, like we were super duper close to them and then they died, and then after a while you like kind of forget things. It just, this just happens, and it doesn't make the feeling lesser, it just means that's what happens.
My best friend died in a car accident when I was 19 years old, and just barely in the process of kind of transitioning out. I was still kind of in the church and kind of out. My best friend was 20 at the time when he died. And I can understand and sympathize with the feelings of people who need there to be an afterlife of some kind. It's an understandable belief. It's an understandable feeling to want there to be some continuation and not have to deal with the finality of it all. So that would be one example of something you should look at critically, even though it's uncomfortable. If there's anything uncomfortable to look at critically and skeptically, it's this idea that there's an afterlife, because that can really devastate somebody who lost somebody. But regardless of that, it's always preferable to reject falsehood of any kind, no matter what it is. I can't remember who said it, but some author who I'll probably think of and remember later said that, I think it was Christopher Hitchens actually, who said, if it's false, whatever it is, anything that's false deserves to be refuted. And of course, Carl Sagan said it's always preferable to embrace reality, no matter how uncomfortable. And it's always preferable in a practical sense, not just theoretically, not just because you want to be, smarter than everybody else, but practically speaking, it improves your day-to-day, everyday life to embrace reality, no matter how comforting the opposite of that is.
Yeah, and even the things that people consider to be comforting, when you really think about it, everything can be discomforting. What's really discomforting is when you run out of showtime And here you are going, gosh, why did I decide to only do 45 minutes? Oh, yeah, I have other things in life. But of course, we have Nathan Dickey now. You, on the last time you were on, you gave the answer to the joke question. You had 2 jokes, and I think we're going to call you, for this show anyway, the king of dad jokes. So what?
Oh, I don't know about that. I know some. I know some people.
You told 2. Yeah, I know. There's, but they haven't been on the show yet. I haven't met them yet. So far, you are on the top of the mountain. So keep your status. What do you have?
All right. Why does Dr. Pepper come in a bottle?
Why?
Because his wife left him.
Oh, okay. Now, is that the one, or do you have any more?
That's all I got.
That's all you got. Okay, it's good. Keep them wanting more. So, where can people find your show, and do you have a feel for like when it's going to get back?
Very soon, within the month, I'm hoping. By the end of February, there should be at least 1 episode out. That's what I'm shooting for. Preferably, hopefully sooner than that. You can find my show on iTunes by searching A Leap of Doubt. The A in that title is important. A Leap of Doubt. I'm on Twitter at The Nathiest, just like atheist, but with an N at the beginning. And I'm on Facebook, Nathan Dickey. Just search my name. I'm sure you and I have lots of mutuals. And so I'm there. I've got a Facebook page and a Facebook group associated with Leap of Doubt as well.
It's nice that being on the opposite sides of the alphabet when it comes to podcasts, we can still get along. So thank you again, Nathan, for being on the show. It's been a lot of fun, and happy Sunday.
Oh yeah, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.